Hey folks, this guide will show you how to use the Ongyoki. Let's talk about the stats on the Soul Core, beginning with the special effects, the first being stealth and the second being backstab damage. At a max rank of 30, the stealth scales up to AAA, while the backstab damage scales up to 3.8%. The yokai ability itself is referred to as out of sight. Hold down the command button to transform into an Ongyoki and vanish from your enemy's sight. You will remain invisible until you run out of anima or release the button, upon which you will suddenly reveal yourself and strike the enemy. The anima cost for this is 4 at first, and the longer you consume it, the more anima you will use. However, the anima drain is more when the player moves around rather than staying still. The player absorbs yokai pools to recover anima both on the initial use and when released, but not if the player is simply passing over the yokai pool. While the attunement cost is on the moderate end at 6. Let's talk about the ability itself. This is an ability that you ultimately channel. The response time is also very slow, and this ability works as a combination of a bunch of ninjutsu. So long as it is active and the player is purple, as you can see, it functions like the smoke ball, and that enemies are immediately de-aggroed except for non-boss enemies. It functions like the sneak thief and catwalking scroll put together, and that it allows the player to navigate around and be completely silent and undetected. It functions like the Kodama transformation scroll, and that the player can make contact with enemies and not incur detection. It functions like the levitation scroll, and that the player is immune to environmental hazards. The additional thing that this soul core does is that it makes the player completely immune to all damage. Even better than the protection talisman, as attacks will simply phase through the player and not stagger them. The only caveat being unless the player is already inflicted with a damage over time ailment. Also, when the player releases the button, the player will spin their staff and inflict a decent amount of corruption. However, my advice would be less to use this to inflict corruption and more so for all the other previously mentioned benefits. This single soul core saves me from needing to ready so many different jutsu, as it is the only way to bypass canine enemies without them sniffing the player out regardless of proximity. It is the only way to bypass gaki that are waiting above to pounce on the player. It is the only way to completely bypass yokai mist regardless of proximity. And the player can outright push enemies out of the way. I find the only flaw to this is how slow the player moves when they're transformed, and that they are forced to do the spinning staff attack after release. However, it does not allow the player to bypass the Biwa Boku Boku summoning of revenants. Otherwise, and despite this, this is still my must-have soul core. While the player is using Ongyoki, they are completely immune to all grabs.
Giant Toe can be difficult to approach with his bombs and his paralysis powders. I approach him and get past this with the Ongyoki. I bait the jump attack, get behind him, and release it to get the backstab damage and finish him off.
You might be wondering why I decided to cover a soul core, and that is because one, these are one of the few that Pooferllama did not complete, and Ongyoki is one of the 4 demons that are said to be the precursors of the ninja we know today, so it's on brand.